As we delve into the annals of history, we come across the accounts of numerous warlords and conquerors who left a trail of destruction and terror in their wake. Among them, Timur stands out as perhaps the most terrifying and gruesome of them all. Though he may be known by various other names, there is no denying the impact that Timur had on the course of world history. It is difficult to fathom that the atrocities that we are about to discuss were committed by a man who was unable to even mount a war horse on his own or wield a weapon properly. Yet, such was the cruelty of Timur that his name has gone down in infamy for the most insane and horrifying punishments inflicted upon his enemies. So, buckle up as we take a journey into the dark and twisted mind of Timur and delve deeper into his background and the countless brutal acts that he perpetrated. Whether you are already familiar with his story or not, prepare to be shocked and horrified by the depths of depravity that one man was capable of unleashing upon the world. The skull towers of Isfahan. Isfahan, the Persian city, was a bustling hub of culture, intellect, and economic prosperity. It was in need of a strong army to safeguard its inhabitants, but unfortunately, it was ill-prepared for the arrival of Tamerlane's army. As his tens of thousands of horse killers descended upon the city, the residents, realizing the futility of resisting, surrendered without a fight. What followed next was a barbaric act of inhumanity that defies comprehension. Tamerlane gave the order to execute every man, woman, and child in the city, and his soldiers were tasked with collecting a set number of citizens' heads to count. The scale of the atrocity is difficult to fathom, but according to a historian who documented the crime, 28 towers were erected in the city, each containing 1,500 skulls. The historian was forced to stop counting in disgust and terror, but by that point, it was estimated that between 70,000 to 100,000 people, which was roughly the entire population of the city, had been slaughtered in the most gruesome manner. Even the livestock, dogs, and cats of the town were not spared. Although the use of skull towers was not new in history, it became Tamerlane's preferred method of conquest in the future. The sheer scale of the atrocity committed in Isfahan is a chilling reminder of the extent to which humans can descend into savagery and brutality. The real boogeyman. To truly understand the terror that Timur struck into the hearts of his enemies, one must look at a specific incident that occurred during his retaliation against Isfahan. The account of a German prisoner who witnessed the aftermath of the initial massacre is particularly chilling. According to the prisoner, Timur ordered the women and children of Isfahan to be taken to a plain outside the city. He then commanded that children under the age of 7 be separated from the group and ordered his soldiers to ride over them with their horses. When his counselors and the mothers of the children begged for mercy, Timur refused to listen and ordered the horrific act to be carried out. But even his own soldiers were hesitant to follow such a barbaric command, and none of them were willing to be the first to ride over the innocent children. This enraged Timur, who took matters into his own hands and rode over the children himself. He then challenged his soldiers, saying, "Now I should like to see who will not ride after me." In the end, all the children were trampled upon, and the death toll was estimated to be 7,000. If you are enjoying the content so far, then consider liking the video and subscribing. King of Baghdad is considered a jewel among the rich and cultured cities of Asia, capital of Islam, and a symbol of enlightenment and sophistication. All that changed when Timur's army descended upon the city like a swarm of locusts, moths, and ants. People of Baghdad could only watch in terror Timur's massive army camped outside their gates. They knew that they were facing a horrific siege. Their city was no longer a haven of peace, rather a palace of hell and conflict. Timur's troops were tasked with collecting heads for the construction of skull pyramids. Each soldier was expected to gather 2 heads. Timur's orders were clear. Not a single home in the city was to be spared, and every private dwelling was to be demolished. Even the most vulnerable members of society, such as women, children, and the elderly, were not exempt from Timur's wrath. Not even a quarter of mercy was shown to them. In the end, An estimated 90,000 people, mostly Muslims, were slaughtered in the streets of Baghdad. Timur's soldiers built 120 towers made of the skulls of their victims, each one a horrifying monument to the depths of Timur's barbarism and cruelty. The once great city of Baghdad was forever changed by Timur's brutal attack. Its people, culture, and history were left shattered in the wake of its devastating conquest. Industrial slaughter in Delhi. As Timur invaded India, he justified his actions by claiming that the sultans of Delhi were too tolerant towards Hindus. His invasion was intended to address this supposed issue. Along the way, Timur took almost 100,000 Hindu prisoners as he rampaged through northern India, leaving behind a trail of blood and destruction. Before engaging in the war for Delhi against Sultan Nasir-ud-Din Mahmud, Timur ordered the ruthless execution of all 100,000 Hindu prisoners. Despite this industrial slaughter, Timur emerged victorious on the battlefield. The Hindu males in Delhi were fully aware of the fate that awaited them beyond the city walls. Rather than surrender, they chose to set fire to their own residences and kill their wives and children as they ran into the battle, preferring to die with their loved ones, rather than suffer the same fate as the 100,000 Hindus Timur had brutally executed. Enemy of the Christian. It was the year 1399. That Turkey was under attack. The guards of the city were mostly Christian Armenians, and they were the ones standing between the town and the army of Tamerlane. The conqueror promised that no blood would be shed if the guards would submit to his demands. The guards finally gave in, hoping that the promise would be honored. Sadly, it was not to be. Tamerlane ordered the burial of 3,000 of the defenders alive, fulfilling his sinister vow of revenge against the Christians in the region. The conqueror's wrath extended beyond Turkey to Georgia. The king of Georgia, Baghdad, proved to be a difficult opponent to break down. This made Timur even angrier, and he promised a sinister retaliation. His soldiers marched through the countryside, ravaging, burning, and killing everything in their path. At Takivi, the locals took refuge in a monastery out of terror for their lives. However, Timur and his soldiers found them there. They selected the young and the strong to be taken out of the town, while the old and feeble were brutally slashed with swords. The surviving villagers were then given a choice: convert to Islam right away or perish in their monastery. The Christians chose martyrdom, and the flames consumed their bodies as they prayed to God. It was a terrible death, but they chose to stand by their faith, even in the face of such brutality. Enemy of Islam. In the winter of 1400, Tamerlane's armies marched into Syria, pushing deep into the region. The Egyptian Sultan, alarmed by this aggression, dispatched a valiant army of Mamelukes to defend the city. However, after a few skirmishes, the Sultan withdrew his troops, leaving the city exposed and vulnerable. Despite this, the defenders of the city, determined to protect their homes and families, put up a brave fight, holding out for approximately a month before eventually succumbing to the overwhelming forces of Tamerlane's army. During the siege, the inhabitants of the city suffered terribly at the hands of Tamerlane's soldiers. Many were burned, bastinaded, crushed in wine presses, or subjected to various forms of torture. Rape was a common crime, and countless women and children were taken as slaves. In the chaos of the siege, many infants were abandoned and left to die when their mothers were taken away to be sold into slavery. Enemy of the civilized world. Genghis Khan, often cited as the worst mass killer in history, was responsible for the deaths of millions of people. However, Tamerlane, the Turco-Mongol conqueror who followed him, came in second place. His conquests left few functioning governments in their wake, and his army committed countless acts of robbery, murder, and pillage. Tamerlane's empire was not known for its religious tolerance. 19th century historian Peter Fredet wrote that never assuredly were their deeds of cruelty so awful and so multiplied, perpetrated either by Alexander the Great or any other conqueror except Tamerlane. British historian John Joseph Saunders further noted that, till the advent of Adolf Hitler, Timur stood forth in history as the supreme example of soulless and unproductive militarism. The campaigns of Tamerlane are believed to have resulted in the deaths of around 17 million people, which, at the time, represented approximately 5% of the world's population. This left a truly horrifying legacy that continues to be remembered to this day. As we come to the end of this video on the atrocities committed by Tamerlane, we hope that this has shed light on the devastating impact of war and conquest. It is important to remember the millions of lives lost and the suffering inflicted upon innocent people. Thanks for watching the video, and if you found it informative, please like and subscribe to Time Capsule for similar content. We look forward to sharing more knowledge with you in the future. Until then, take care.